Thank you guys for being here, even with the snow. So tonight we are talking about spiritual health, and we're going to be talking into the microphone. So if you notice that we're not looking at you over there or over there, it's because we have to speak into them. But anyways, tonight we're talking about spiritual health, and we're talking specifically about spiritual health in the midst of busyness. So I have Shomari Tate here, and I'm really excited to have him here for this conversation. So do you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, hello everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Shomari Tate. I get to serve here as our preaching and discipleship resident. I also work at Hope College. I am our chaplain of discipleship. I'm one of 8 chaplains. And then I'm also on a doctoral track to get my PhD. So I'm a full-time student. I go to Western right now taking Greek and Hebrew classes. And then my PhD journey will continue at Baylor.
Whoa. You got a lot going on.
Just a couple things.
Yeah, you're just a little bit busy. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Okay, so tonight we're talking about spiritual health, like I said, and what we're really going to look into is this idea of asking ourselves, are we spiritually healthy? And I feel convicted to kind of have this conversation because in the midst of a busy season, I am the opposite about being intentional about my spirituality. So I wanted to have Shomari here to kind of talk to us a little bit about what it looks like to be intentional with our spiritual health, because I've sat down with some of you in my last couple months of being here, and I've heard the same thing, that I'm not the only one that kind of struggles with being intentional with your spiritual health. So first off, Shomari, can you just tell us what is your experience with practicing spiritual disciplines, whether it's daily or weekly? What is your experience with that?
Just any type of disciplines?
Yeah.
So going back to when I was a kid, I mean, we always went to church and things like that, but those felt kind of more obligatory than I was actually incorporating these things into my days. It was almost like checking off boxes. I also went to a private school, so church and praying and those things,
all around you.
Those were always spiritual habits, but it wasn't until I was in graduate school that I actually started to be intentional about waking up early and committing the first hour of my day to Scripture.
Okay, that's good.
That's one way I started. And when I decided to go into ministry, I started fasting. And fasting's a hot topic, because not everybody can fast. But for me, it was eating one meal a day, preparing for a ministry, for pastoring.
Wow.
And I did that for an entire summer. And then after that, I fast one day a week, every week.
Okay.
So
Still currently.
Okay. So that's one that I've built that's been a game changer. And when I talk about fasting, I choose to not eat much, but fasting could be for someone that may have something like an eating disorder. Fasting could be making sure you eat 3 meals a day. Fasting could be if someone's addicted to social media, getting off social media.
It can look different for everyone.
It can look different for everyone, but fasting is such a great way for me to replenish, to rejuvenate, to restore, to reconnect, to recollect everything that God's been doing, to kind of anticipate what he is doing. And then one of my favorite spiritual disciplines that's the most biblical and the most talked about in the Bible is Sabbath.
That's a good one. That's a hard one.
Sabbath, the almighty S word. And Sabbath was something that I used to kind of think was antithetical to what I was trying to do. I used to be one that wanted to just go all the time. But when I started really incorporating Sabbath into my day is when I would say my spiritual health really started to change.
Okay.
It gave me a good spiritual rhythm to kind of approach. So that's kind of a brief overview of
And
spiritual
when you
habits.
started fasting, what was that like? Was it obviously probably wasn't easy to be intentional about it at first. So what are some things that you did to make sure that you were intentional about making that time?
So a lot of folks like to just hit fasting really hardcore, but I made sure to do it in a way that honored my body to where I was getting vitamins and all that good stuff and not starving myself, but also committing myself to drawing closer to God. So making sure I had a protein shake before endeavoring in the fast each day, start the day with a protein shake, making sure I was drinking plenty of water, making sure I was tied to Scripture as my quote-unquote spiritual food. And then also making sure that I stayed in routine prayer at least 4 to 5 times a day.
Okay, wow.
So those things kept me regimented and allowed me to not focus on, wow, I'm hungry, I need to eat.
Okay,
yada, yada.
that's good. Yeah, and I think with any spiritual discipline, it's a build up to get there. Even if it's prayer, it's not something with fasting. It's a build up to get to that point where you're in constant communication. Maybe you just say a quick prayer before you get out of bed in the morning, and then you wait, you build up to that. So did
Yeah.
you experience that too? Like just building up to the fast?
Yeah. No.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, no. I wish that was kind of how
Yeah.
I did it. I would encourage everyone when you're like developing good spiritual habits, to build up to them. So like with fasting, like try 12 hours, try a day, before you dive into a long. But the first time I fasted was for an entire summer.
Oh my goodness.
When I accepted my call to
Wow.
to ministry, and I would not recommend that to anyone. I'm a bit
Pro tip.
Yeah.
Do not try this at home.
I am a bit extreme, so it was one meal a day from June to August.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was kind of intense. So I would
bet.
not say that I worked my way into that.
But you would recommend working your way up to any sort of spiritual discipline.
Absolutely, especially Sabbath.
Yeah.
And I speak so strongly about Sabbath because Sabbath is God's model for how we're supposed to live life. It's the model that we have for creation. And on the seventh day, he rested.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite scriptures comes from the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 58. It says, "If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going on your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Lord.
Yeah.
And I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." And what that kind of tells us is that there's actually great blessing in resting.
Yeah.
There's actually great harvest in taking time to just stop, and not just to rest, but again, to recall, to reflect, to anticipate, to pray. If the only thing you're doing on Sabbath is just purely resting, then you're probably not optimizing the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a time for prayer. The Sabbath is a time to dive deep and to have some intimate moments with God.
Okay.
So I highly recommend the Sabbath.
Yeah, I think something that I never understood about the Sabbath is that it's not just like doing nothing all day. Like it's actually filling yourself up with other things and like talking to God and making time for that. Like it's not just sitting at home doing nothing and resting. So can you tell us like what does your Sabbath look like?
Yeah. So a typical work day like today looked like getting up at 5, going through my day, and now we're here. On Sabbath, I always let myself sleep until about 8.
Okay. Sleeping in.
Yeah, sleeping in.
8 a.m.
I sleep until 8. It's usually on Saturday.
Okay.
Because Sunday is
a work day.
We're here, and we're here for a while. And then I have the gathering at Hope College at 8 p.m. on Sundays. So
Saturday's your day.
So Saturday's my Sabbath.
Okay. So your Sabbath does not have to be a Sunday. I think that's a clear, like something to clear up too.
Yeah. So traditional thought would say that Sabbath it should be Sunday because of church. Yeah. But actually, if we look at the Hebrew calendar, the seventh day is Saturday.
Okay.
So it should always be on Saturday.
Okay.
But if you're taking one, you can take it on Tuesday. You can take it on Wednesday. You can take it on Thursday. Whatever day you have to really devote to God, I say do it. It doesn't have to be a distinct day, but you should have a day where you're taking at least 8 to 12 hours, hopefully the whole day. But I always say working up to it because culture kind of has given us an idol of being busy.
Yeah, that's so true.
A lot of us, when we hear Sabbath and taking a day off, we think, I would miss so much.
Yeah.
I would be so behind if I took one day off.
Yeah.
But the entire world moved after God took his day off. It still functioned, and God came back to work the next day. And that's kind of the model that we have is, do we have faith to trust that things will be okay?
Even when you rest.
If we take our hands off of it.
Okay, that's so good. Yeah. And talk about like preparing for Sabbath. I've been hearing that too. Like Pastor Ben talks a lot about preparing to take a Sabbath, like you like preparing for it. So it's not as like, oh man, what's going to happen now that my hands are out,
Yes.
What does that look like?
So since I take mine on Saturday, everything has to be done Friday.
So you give yourself like, we're getting it done on Friday.
Yeah, so when I get home from work on Fridays, I usually get home about 3 or 4 on Fridays. At least I try to.
Yeah.
And we clean. We make sure dishes, kitchen, bathroom, all that good stuff is clean.
Okay.
Clothes are washed, things are put away.
So you're not even doing like household chores on a Sabbath?
No, I try not to.
Okay.
I try to really devote that day to a lot of prayer, a lot of reflection.
Yeah.
And to me, that feels like working. If we're going to honor the Sabbath, we really shouldn't be working. Like some folks will say, well, I'm taking a working Sabbath. I'm like, well, that's
not a Sabbath.
You're working.
Yeah.
The Sabbath should be a day where no labor is done.
Okay. That's
so making sure everything is done Friday night and then making sure I have a good agenda for the day.
So even on your Sabbath, there's an agenda. Okay, talk about that.
So early morning, we get up, we work out.
Okay.
Then we come back, we get into scripture, we pray, eat a little something, take the dog for a long walk, just to connect with nature and be outside, and then come back, a little more scripture, and then probably a sermon or two. I'm a sermon nerd, so I like to listen to a lot of sermons. So just listening to sermons, thinking,
just filling yourself up.
Yeah, and those things fit at different places depending on the day, but I always make sure that there's time and space for each
I think
of
it's interesting that you still structure out like your Sabbath, you know? Like that's kind of interesting. Okay. So let's talk about somebody who is like just coming to know the Lord. They're not really like ready to do a Sabbath or fasting. They're maybe thinking just like simple praying like daily and reading the Bible. What tips would you give someone that is trying to implement those things into their busy schedule?
Yeah, I would say those things like praying, those things like reading the Bible daily. It's like working out. You know, if you get into the gym and you go hard for the first 3 days that you're in there, you're going to be burnt out. You're going to be sore. You're probably going to be injured. Yeah, and it's going to take a lot longer to recover. I think our spirits are kind of similar. Okay. If you overwhelm, yourself with something you're not used to, I think you're very likely to put it down.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Wait, say that again.
Like I think when you go into like the extremes of like trying to like I'm gonna read 8 chapters of the Bible a day, I'm gonna worship for an hour,
put that pressure on yourself.
You put that pressure on yourself, and then when you disappoint yourself, you're like, okay, I'm not gonna do that again because I don't want to disappoint myself.
That's so good.
So I think what it looks like to start starting off with 2 chapters a day, 1 chapter a day, devoting yourself to 10 minutes and then just doing that just something and then doing that for like a week or 2 and then up to 10 minutes to 20. Do that for a week or 2, up 20 minutes to 30 until you're at praying for an hour and a half a day, but that takes time. Yeah, because
for some people hearing you say like praying for an hour, that sounds super daunting. You have to work up to it.
I used to think praying was so like cliche, like I didn't want to do it. And so I started off with a mentor of mine. We started off for 1 minute every week.
Okay.
Like we would just get together and pray for 1 minute every week.
So you had accountability in someone because they were doing it with you.
And then outside of that once a week, then I would do it 1 minute a day. Yeah. And then it would just slowly build up from there. And that was, I believe, when I was in high school.
So you can start small.
You can start really small because something's always better than nothing.
That's so true. Yeah. Yep. I think like when someone is looking into getting like adapting spiritual disciplines into their life, something that I think that has helped me is having accountability. Like you definitely don't have to do that alone. Like you can count on other people to hold you accountable, and then you're holding them accountable. And I think that really helps. So tell us a little bit more about like people that hold you accountable in your spiritual disciplines.
Yeah, I actually have accountability partners.
Okay,
cool. You know, like, and they're kind of all around the country. I have accountability partners in New York. I have like a couple good friends that we talk every once in a while that live in like the Bahamas.
Okay, look at that.
And they're pastors and ministers and such. And when we talk, it's always, hey, how's your spirituality? Like, how's your spiritual life? What's your prayer life like? What are you struggling with?
Yeah, so you're intentional about asking that question, like how are you doing spiritually?
Oh, absolutely, which then gets into us like being very, very accountable about spiritual habits. So, what's your dating life like? You know, are you and whoever you're seeing, are you honoring the Lord in your decisions of being together? All that good
it all comes out of that question.
And that takes trust. You know, you really have to trust the people that you're with, that they do have your best interests, even when they might tell you something you don't want to hear. I think that's such a necessary component of accountability is that when we put it all on us, we're the standard bearers, and sometimes we change our standards to meet comfort and convenience. So I think it's so important to have someone else hold the standard that you originally set, so you can't compromise with yourself.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that they're called spiritual disciplines. So it takes discipline, which takes practice and training, and then like discipline is always going to trump like motivation and convenience. Like it's the same thing with working out. Like all the Instagram influencers, they say like, when you ask them in their like Q&As, like how do you get to work out every day? It's always like, it's not going to be convenient and you're not going to be motivated. So you just have to be disciplined. So that's kind of a tip that I would give too. Like just remembering like you have to be disciplined and you have to hold yourself to a certain standard, but also having accountability and saying like, this person's going to help me get there. It's not a bad thing, like to lean on someone else.
Not at all. And it's also not a bad thing to trust, because I think we don't like to trust folks with our spirituality. You know, like we live in a time and culture where like my faith is so personal. Yeah. And it's like, if you think about Christian faith, I can't speak for other faiths, but Christian faith, it's a communal faith. It involves other people. It involves being with people, walking with people. That's the extension of a discipline is discipleship.
Okay,
right?
That's good. Yeah, so we talked about like making a small commitment, finding accountability, and then I saw this quote on your Instagram. You reposted something. I don't have the quote, but it was something about you have to say no to something to like say yes to God. I don't know if you even remember that, but let's kind of talk a little bit about like what does it look like to literally say no to plans because you have to say yes to spending time with God.
Yeah, so let's go back to Halloween.
Okay.
Let's just go to Halloween.
Let's do it.
It was a good friend of mine's birthday, and they're like, "Well, we're gonna have a costume party. It's gonna be great. Yada yada. You should come Friday night. It'll be so much fun." And like I had such a long day, and it had been like 36 hours at the college of like working 14-hour days, and dealing with some very tough things like at the college, just instances with students, you know, like some real heavy things. So by Friday, I was physically exhausted. I was spiritually exhausted. I was mentally exhausted. And like friends are like, "We can't wait to see you." And like I had to pull the plug at like 5. I was like, "Yo, I need some deep prayer time." Like my soul is weary. Like, and if like I could be there and I want to be there, because you know FOMO is a real thing. Feeling of missing out is such a real thing. So that was definitely a factor, but I had to rise above that to say I need to replenish. A party is always gonna be there. Halloween happens once a year. I'll wear the Teletubbies costume next year.
I want to see you wear that to church sometime.
Tinky Winky is the Teletubbies costume that I have.
You should wear that this Sunday when you preach.
I'm not going to do that.
Okay, so that is it easy for you now to say no to spend time with God, or is there been a time in your life when it wasn't easy? Because I can assume for most people it's not easy to say no to plans with friends.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Okay.
So like it's easy. Honestly, like plans with friends, I'm the notorious friend that like things will happen and like everyone will look up and be like, "Where'd he go?" And like I like snuck out and went home. So like outside of like spending time with God, that's just who I am.
Okay. That's
so
your
like
personality.
that hasn't been hard, but like making sure that I make space to spend time with God. That's been the interesting discipline, because one of the things that one of my pastoral mentors gave me a while ago was, if you're too busy to pray for at least 30 minutes to an hour a day in ministry with everything you got going on, if you're too busy just to pray, you're too busy. If you can't make time and space for God, you're too busy. Yeah.
That's really good. Okay. So we've talked a little about like the how we can be more disciplined in our spiritual life, but let's talk about like why. Like why should we even be disciplined in our spiritual life?
Can I give you a preview of this Sunday?
Oh, we want to hear the preview, don't we? Let's do it.
A preview of this Sunday?
I love it.
So I'll be preaching from Deuteronomy 7
okay.
this Sunday, and this kind of answers that why. So Deuteronomy 7 verse 6 says, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all people. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers, that the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him, and," there's this "and" part that's important, "keeps his commandments to 1,000 generations." He keeps his covenant, you know, and part of like why should we develop spiritual disciplines? Why should we take serious spiritual habits? Because God takes us seriously. So
That's
as much as God is steadfast to us, we should be steadfast back.
Like obedience is a response to what he did for us and his love for us.
Exactly. Obedience is kind of our answering speech. It's not just we're doing this out of piety or piousness. We're doing this to answer to God's activity, seen and unseen.
Yeah. And when you are like taking part in spiritual disciplines, I feel like you're more likely in a position to really see how God is working in your life and how he's transforming your life. It's like your eyes have been like more open to see that, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I believe I can't remember who said this quote, but the quote basically is that there's a God-sized hole in every single person.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the only thing that can fill that is God. But we, in our regular human natural disciplines, we look for other things to fill that. And they don't always have to be bad things. It could be working out. It could be self-help. It could be a motivational speech. You know,
they might not be bad in themselves, but
it's not going to fill you.
Yeah.
It's not going to fill you the way God can fill you. And that's why spiritual disciplines are so important.
Yeah.
It's not that spiritual disciplines earn us grace.
Yeah.
We did nothing to deserve grace, but spiritual disciplines, as Paul says, helps us work out our salvation, because we can't work for the salvation, but we do have to work it out. We have obligation to work it out every single day.
Yeah. So spiritual health really does take intentionality, right? Because motivation's not always going to be there. Convenience is not always going to be there. So tell us like how being intentional with spiritual disciplines has helped you on your walk with the Lord. Like how has it changed your walk with Jesus and like your life?
I would say it's helped me remain assured in tough times.
Okay, that's good.
I'm a worrier, and like when things don't go well, I get like I tend to get upset.
Yeah.
Because I like to have control.
Yeah.
So what good spiritual disciplines have kind of I think about it like kind of like this cup of pop. In that if I pour out this pop right now, the last thing that's going to come out this cup is the pop, because that's the first thing that went into it.
Ooh, that's good.
So I always think of my spiritual disciplines, whatever comes out of me when I get tired and I'm busy and I'm stressed, it usually is the first thing that's in me. Like what's in me is going to come out of me.
Yeah,
so that's
really
why
good.
Spiritual disciplines, when things are going well, is so important. So those spiritual disciplines can come out of you when things are going bad.
When things are hard, yeah.
Exactly. Or when you're busy, or when you're stressed, overwhelmed, etc. Yeah.
That's good. All right. Anything else you want to add to the conversation? It's good stuff. We're taking it all in.
Take care of you. Take care of you. I know the Christian life calls us to be there for each other, and we should in everything that we do. But it's tough to be there for other people when you can't be there for yourself. So make sure you never abandon yourself. And part of that is making sure you're taking care of your body. You're taking care of your mind. If you don't have a counselor, you should have a counselor, especially if you're in college, especially if your work is high capacity, especially if you're running and ripping a lot. I just think having a counselor is such a good way, you know, to make sure our mental health is intact. And it's sad because that has been stigmatized in the church for so long.
Yeah.
So get a counselor, you know, devote 20 minutes at least to physical activity every single day. Make sure your blood is flowing. Make sure you're drinking water. Those things are so important in the season of busyness. I'm one who I'll sit here right now. I'm drinking coffee because it's been, I think this is hour 16 of the day.
Busy guy.
Yeah. So we always got to make sure like I'm getting at least 60 ounces of water in a day.
Yeah, I need to do that. I really need to do that. Okay. Well, thank you for being here and having this conversation with us.
Are we done now?
Yeah, we're done.
Oh,
yeah.
snap, that was quick.
Yeah. Does anybody have like any questions? You guys can ask questions. Yeah. Okay. Well, if you think of questions, you know who to talk to. You guys can come talk to us afterwards.
Yeah.
If you guys are wanting to get on that path of starting spiritual disciplines and you need help or you need somewhere to start, feel free to come up and talk to one of us because we would love to help you with that. All right. That's the podcast. Yay. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
That was fun.
That was so fun.